or you look out in the world and you see no one that looks like you, it is incomprehensible for most people to imagine that they can have that level of success or joy or strength, whatever it may be. And you know, the key thing that I think needs to be focused on in terms of equity is that it's not a zero-sum game. Just because someone else has the same advantage that you do doesn't mean that you're losing anything. And it actually creates an environment that is so fair, but also inclusive, where people feel as though they have a seat at the table, as they should.
But then this very good friend of mine came to me with this idea. And then we spoke to a director, Lana Wilson, who's a beautiful director. And I said, I gave her all of my archives. I just handed them over to her. And I said, please, the one thing I ask of you is that you make this film about something bigger than me. And she said, well, it's a doc about you. And I said, I know that, but this is about a much bigger topic. And as we discussed it, we started talking about the sexualization of young women, especially in our country. And I was at the center of it. I was promoting it, and I was doing it, and I was lucky because I was surrounded by a very strong mom. I never did move to Hollywood. I always went to regular schools, so I had this sort of community around me that was protecting me, buoying me, and so I did not become the type of statistic that Hollywood created. And listen, Hollywood is predicated on eating its young. That's what it wants to do. It wants to build you up and then devour you. And from a very early age, I learned the importance of education, and I knew that if I went to university, they couldn't take that away from me. So all of the pitfalls of Hollywood, you know, that's the way it was being handled in the 70s and early 80s. And it's gotten better a bit, but we still have a long way to go. And one of the things the documentary, I think, did was start the conversation.
No, it was Father Knows Best. Now, I was really little, so I must have watched reruns. But then in the 60s, it was the Donna Reed show. You know, these and I Love Lucy, very traditional roles for women. And then in 1968, I remember there was a show called Julia with Diane Carroll. Yeah. She was black, she was a widow, she was a single mother taking care of her son. And I thought, wow, that's different. But what was really formative for me was in 1970 when the Mary Tyler Moore Show came out. Because here was a 30-something single woman driving her cool Mustang to Minneapolis and working at a local news station. And suddenly I was 13 and I thought, wow, that's so cool. I want to be that person. So when I was offered the job at the Today Show, I said to Michael Gartner, who was then president of NBC News, I had worked in local news for 6 years. I had covered the Pentagon, covered the Desert Storm and all these other important stories. And I said, I'm interested in this job, but only if you'll give me a 50-50 division of labor with Brian Gumbel. I want to do as many hard news interviews as he does. I don't want to be relegated to cooking segments and fashion shows and celebrity interviews. I've earned my stripes, and that's what I'm demanding. I don't know where I got the chutzpah to do that.
About 11 years old, and I'd seen a commercial on TV for a dishwashing liquid, and the boys in my class at the time said, it said, women all over America are fighting greasy pots and pans. And the boys said, yeah, that's where women belong, in the kitchen. And at 11, I just found that infuriating and wrote lots of letters and put pen to paper, and they ended up changing the commercial to people all over America. And it's funny to look back at it now, because that was before social media, where you had a reach that was so much greater. It was just an 11-year-old with a pen and paper. But it just, I guess, goes to show that if you know that there's something wrong and you're using your voice to advocate in the direction of what is right, that can really land and resonate and make huge change for a lot of people. So your voice is not small, it just needs to be heard.
The making of the thing, right? It's always about, how do we make something? What is our offering? And in that sense, I feel like it's really a wonderful connection, because it's not just about the final product. It's about the willingness to fail and to create and then create again. And it's also an offering. You can write poems for yourself, and many people do. I write poems for myself. You might imagine I'm writing lots of secret poems right now that no one can see. But really, when a poem comes to life is when it is offered and it collides with another human soul. That's when the poem becomes complete. The making of the thing, right? It's always about how do we make something? What is our offering? And in that sense, I feel like it's really a wonderful connection, because it's not just about the final product. It's about the willingness to fail and to create and then create again. And it's also an offering. You can write poems for yourself, and many people do. I write poems for myself. You might imagine I'm writing lots of secret poems right now that no one can see. But really, when a poem comes to life is when it is offered and it collides with another human soul. That's when the poem becomes complete.